Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
And welcome to another redo episode. And today we are redoing opposite action because the last one we did, which I think was quite a few months ago now, was check the facts. So there's been a bit of a delay, we could say, in between talking about check the facts and then coming back to you today with more about opposite action. But here we are for this month's episode. And wanted to kick things off with saying that we have a new patron named Matt. So thank you, Matt, for becoming a recent new patron. We really appreciate it.
Much appreciation.
Yes, tons and tons of appreciation. And if you want to become a patron like Matt, we have the info down in the show notes for you. It's patreon.com/DBT and me. So you can find us there and also give to the podcast, which we really appreciate. And then for things to promote today, Kate may chime in here because, yes, I'm the one doing the intro, so I'm the one who's going to talk about promotion. But one of the things that Kate was talking about before we started recording, which is true, it's kind of sometimes in an odd way like we keep the podcasting world that we inhabit here with all of you. Yes, like very separate from the day-to-day practical clinical work that we do as therapists. And even though Kate mentions it on the podcast, if you've been a long-time listener, you are aware that Kate runs a mental health clinic. It's a group practice called Heartfelt Mental Health. It is virtual only. It's here in Washington, and what that means is that with the laws being what they currently are, because Kate holds a license in Washington, and all of her clinicians hold licenses in Washington to be a client of her clinic, you would also need to be a resident of Washington State. While we know that excludes many of you, we also know there might be some of you listening that are like, hey, I live in Washington. I've been looking for a new therapist. Yeah, exactly. And that they're going to be like, hey, I could have someone who works for Kate be my therapist. That would be cool. Especially if you are a member of the queer community. That is primarily the population that Kate's clinic serves. So you can find Heartfelt Mental Health. It's heartfeltmh.com. Is that right, Kate? I should have looked it up beforehand what the URL was. Okay. Cool. Perfect. So you can go on Kate's website. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll post it in the Facebook group, and you can take the steps there to become a new client at her clinic if you have been in need of a therapist. There's lots of cool things her clinic does. So I'm going to go on for a minute because this is all awesome. One thing is that they also offer medication management. And different than some other clinics that are like, you have to be seeing one of our therapists to also get meds. Maybe you're listening to this and you already have a therapist who you are happily working with, but you're like, ooh, I really have been thinking I might need to look into adding. We don't have a provider right now. Oh, remember, bummer.
Quit.
Okay. Oh, no.
Sorry.
That's right. I thought you still had more on staff. Okay. Bummer about that. Well, maybe stay tuned.
We do offer surgical letters. I don't know if that's
historically, yeah, that's important because people need 2 of those from different mental health therapists. But yeah, historically in the past, Kate has had medication prescribers on staff, and you don't have to be a client of Kate's clinic to see one of the prescribers. Nope. So I know some people need that. And the clinic also has a really fantastic intensive outpatient program, specifically again for LGBTQ plus folks. And that could be really great for people who were recently hospitalized or have been sensing for themselves like, yeah, I've been going to therapy every week, but like my mental health is still suffering quite a bit and I think I need something more. I think I need additional support. Yes, they have a really, really awesome IOP program and other things too. I mean, various
sliding scale
DBT
because
groups,
of the interns, right? Having folks we can offer sliding scale.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. If you need reduced cost therapy, that can be an option for you. So yes, if any of this is resonating with you and you're feeling like that actually sounds like something I've been looking for, check out Kate's website for her clinic. That would be really great.
Thank you.
The other thing that we will name, before we get into things more in depth, a couple disclaimers, I think. One, I don't know how well my internet is behaving.
Oy.
So I'm going to hope that the editing comes out good for this episode. But if it sounds at all like, wow, Kate and Michelle are really talking over each other more than usual, that would be a Zoom lag going on. Or if it seems like one of us is responding just a beat too late to what the other person said, that would be a current Zoom lag going on. So we'll see how that turns out in the final product of the episode. Also, Kate and I both acknowledged before recording today, for various reasons, we are each running on, we both admittedly don't do the best with getting sufficient sleep these days, each for our own respective reasons. But we are both running on a lot less sleep even than we usually do. I was awake from 2 to 4 a.m. with my daughter last night. I don't know why she wouldn't sleep during those hours, but I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep, broken into 2 parts. Kate, you're probably on about the same track.
Not a lot of sleep, and I think whatever my health stuff is just has my fatigue bumped up to 11. So
Yeah. And the weather here in Washington, yes, it's June. That means nothing. It's been cloudy and rainy periodically throughout the day. That doesn't necessarily lead to more energy for most folks. So yes, we are here with all of you. We were saying, we're like, this is going to really test how well we know DBT to talk about it when we're this tired. So we'll see how things go from here. But basically the outline for this episode, of course, it's an episode redo. So it's not going to be terribly different from the first time that we did it. We're going to be reviewing the same handouts that we went over the first time. But again, the sound quality is a lot better than years ago when we first recorded it. So Kate's going to be talking about when to make the decisions about using opposite action. And I think I could share a little bit maybe before you launch into that, and you can share some too, Kate, about just talking about what opposite action is for those who may be listening like,
sure,
what is this skill? Before we get into when to use it. I'll talk about the 4 most common emotions where opposite action can come in handy. And then we will go step by step through how to do it. And then one new element of this episode that we're adding in that we didn't have the first time is that in the first time we recorded this episode, we did weave some little examples throughout, right? We talked about my fear of spiders. That's the thing I use all the time when talking about opposite action with people. But we're going to more clearly talk about some recent personal examples of using opposite action and then break down how we did each of the steps, because I think hearing other people use skills and having those real life examples can be very helpful for not just understanding what a skill is, but actually understanding how it can look. So that's where we're headed with the episode. So yeah, if we get into a little bit of what opposite action is, do you want me to kick that off and then you can follow up with anything I'm leaving out? Does that sound good? Okay, cool. So opposite action is a skill that accompanies check the facts. So that's why when you're thinking about this skill, the first part is going to be to ask yourself, what do I already know about this situation? And making sure that your emotion and or its intensity fits the facts. Now, if it does, then you might not need to use opposite action. But if it does not,
wait for later with the flowchart.
Yes. Kate's going to get into when it does and when it doesn't. But if it doesn't, then this is the skill you're going to want to use, is opposite action. And we did a nice job. I was really proud of us when I was re-listening to our first episode. We did a nice job of talking about what opposite action isn't, right? We were saying like opposite action is not just like putting on a happy face and like quote unquote sucking it up, right? It's not that. But what it is that it's a conscious choice to recognize, I know that right now acting on my emotion would not be effective. Either acting on my emotion with the action urge that my emotion is telling me would have consequences to myself or other people or things I care about. So I don't want to do that. And I'm going to make the choice to choose to do something instead that is going to be more skillful and helpful for me in the long run. Now, the thing about opposite action is that it's going to look different depending on what the emotion is that you're feeling. So we're going to get into some more examples of that as we go through the episode. But that's what it is it's saying for now, I am going to make a choice to act in a way that's going to be skillful and effective rather than letting my emotion mind run the show and dictate what I do next with my actions. So that's what we're really talking about here is when you want to make that decision to use opposite action and then what it can look like to do it. We'll be getting more into that throughout the episode. But anything you would add to that for like what you would say opposite action is?
Yeah, I mean, actually, my first thing tacking on was a little bit in addition to what you were saying, it isn't. Right. I want to say also that it isn't about making yourself more palatable or consumable for other people. While certainly it may have that result, right? It's plausible that acting in opposite action will mean there's less detriment to the relationship that you're in, or, you know, may have positive impacts for other people. The goal isn't, this person wants me to be cheerful, so I better do opposite action so I can be cheerful, right? Or I'm not a good partner if I'm unhappy, or, right, like it's not meant to be oriented towards other people's experience of you. It's meant to be oriented towards your awareness of your emotion, your experience of it, and how to deliberately, as you're speaking to so nicely, Michelle, how to deliberately shift when we can realize that state that we're in isn't serving us one way or another. I just like that, and I wanted to emphasize it's not outward focused, even if it has outward effects, in that sense.
Yeah, I view it as like we ideally, this is a very high bar to set, but we want to be acting in integrity with ourselves and in alignment with our values as much as possible as we're moving through the world. And sometimes our emotion mind can really take us off that track and lead us to act in ways that, you know, maybe in the moment it's hard to realize, but after the fact we look back and we're like, whoa, I said that like really harsh thing to someone that I love. Like, that's not me. I don't want to be saying those things. I don't want to be acting in that way. And when you're able to interrupt that and have opposite action enter and use a skill, then you're more likely to feel like you're acting, from a wise mind place and, making choices that feel good to you.
All right, off we go on the adventure of talking about a flowchart on a podcast.
Yes, where you guys don't necessarily have this in front of you. But Kate, do you want to name the page number for those who might have the second edition manual if people want to follow along?
For the second edition manual, I'm looking at Emotion Regulation Handout 9 on page 218. So it's opposite action and problem solving, deciding which to use. It's thankfully a relatively simplistic flowchart, but it still does strike me as funny to be talking about and describing a flowchart in a purely audible medium. Just funny to me. So at the top here, it defines opposite action as acting opposite to an emotion's action urge, versus problem solving, which we'll get to at another redo episode, which is around avoiding or changing a problem event. So the first question on the flowchart is, does this emotion fit the facts? And it comes with the instruction to go ahead and check the facts, right? So, like Michelle was talking about in the intro, if you go back some number of months, you can find our redo recently of check the facts. So spending the time to sit there and check the facts about the situation and about the emotion. Does it make sense? Does it match in intensity or duration what the situation is? If we go off to the left of the flowchart, the first option is yes. So you've checked the facts and you're like, you know what? Yeah. In point of fact, my emotion is appropriate, commensurate, it fits the facts. So what next? In that case, they would have you ask, is acting on this emotion effective? And wanting you to check in with your wise mind about that. It's good to be in wise mind as much as possible when utilizing pretty much any DBT skill, I would really say. But especially working to bring yourself back to it, because I'm assuming that you, like pretty much all humans, don't just live there all the time, and your brain may be prone to wandering out when you're not paying really close attention to it. So trying to touch back in with your wise mind throughout this process is a really good idea anyway. So you determined that your emotion fits the facts. Is acting on it effective? The first option is yes. So, all right, double yes here. My emotion fits the facts, and acting on it is going to go ahead and be effective. They would then have you be mindful of current emotions, to act on your emotion/action urge, and problem solve unwanted emotions. So essentially, all right, you've done your due diligence, you've looked into this, you've explored the emotion that you're feeling and come to the conclusion that, yeah, this is an appropriate and commensurate response, like emotionally, and doing the thing that my emotion is urging me to do is going to have good results. It's going to be effective in, meeting my ends long term, not just short term. Mm-hmm. So that is one path all the way through the flowchart. If instead, when you ask yourself, is acting on this emotion effective, you say no, then the first, instruction given there is do not act on the emotion or action urge, which, right, that's sort of the point of coming here, right? Okay. And instead consider doing opposite action, which again, as we will be talking about today, exactly what that looks like in a few minutes here. So yeah, even if you have emotions that fit the facts in every way, shape, and form, it doesn't mean that the action urge that's coming with it is effective. For me, especially, this looks like a timing issue. When I use this, for instance, I'll use this a lot after a conflict maybe with my partner where the problem is resolved like verbally, but my emotions are taking some time, right, to come around, right? I'm ready to shift out of that gear a little bit faster than my body is naturally ready to shift out of that gear. And so I can utilize opposite action so that I don't keep acting on those emotions past their efficacy, right? So this is something that can be a little bit timed too, right? So just one example of how that can look. And that's the second arm. All right, now instead, when we ask, does this emotion fit the facts? And we check the facts, the answer is no. Nope, turns out my emotion somewhere in its intensity and or duration, it's not so much in alignment with the facts as I have found them to be. In that case, ask, is acting on this emotion effective? If yes, let's see. Be mindful of current emotions. Same as the yes on the other side. Act, but accept the consequences gracefully, which I like. That is differently wording than just act on the emotion and action urge. If it's not a little bit clear, DBT has a little bit of mistrust for the idea of there being a yes in this instance. Because it also says reconsider opposite action. That's the last instruction down that line. So it's like, all right, you say that your emotion doesn't fit the facts, but acting on it's going to be effective? Really? All right. I really feel like that's the sort of tone and eyebrow that DBT has about that concept, which makes a little bit of sense, right? It is not impossible, but it's going to be pretty rare if the emotion you're feeling is not in alignment with reality, that then suddenly the urge that it's giving you is going to be something that's terribly effective in meeting whatever your needs or goals are in that moment. So I actually understand and to an extent agree with the skepticism that DBT has about that particular path, I guess, down the decision tree. If instead when you ask, if acting on this emotion effective, the answer is no. Just as in the other side, it says do not act on the emotion or action urge. Work on changing the thoughts to fit the facts. And do opposite action. So basically that's saying work through your checking the facts, right, to help yourself bring your story back into alignment with reality a little bit, perhaps more than it is right now, and work on doing opposite action to shift away from the urges that aren't really going to be effective in the situation for you.
Yeah. Great.
Anything you'd add? You good? Okay.
And when Kate... Yeah, I think you did a nice job. And when we get down to our personal examples, I mean, we'll more or less be talking through this too, I feel like, with stuff that's applicable of like, when we check the facts, right? Like, did it fit?
Yeah.
You know, yes or no, then, you know, making the decision to use opposite action and why. So,
Wonderful.
Great.
All right, on to
Okay,
you.
so I'm shifting... Yep, on to me. So shifting over a couple pages in the skills training manual to page 220, handout 10, if any of you are following along with us. So on this page, I like this top box that it has because it's a very quick summary of where opposite action is going to most come in handy and what we're talking about here. It starts with saying every emotion has an action urge. Yep. That's the reason why we have emotions, is because they motivate us to do something. You know, we talk about this often on the podcast, this flow of like something happens, we think something, we feel something, we do something. And we've also used these terms, though it might have been a while since we did, of like there's top-down processing and there's bottom-up processing. Top-down processing means, in that sequence, you want to change the thoughts, which will then impact the emotion that you feel, which will then impact the action that you take. But you can also do it in reverse, which is what opposite action is. Opposite action is a bottom-up process, which is without really focusing on changing your thoughts, you're actually going to start with changing the action and the behavior that you do, which has then the potential to impact the emotion that you're feeling in some way, perhaps. But even if you don't know exactly like why you're feeling what you're feeling, you don't need to for this skill. This is not a skill, you know, check the facts as you dig into that more. But opposite action is really just like, how can you make sure that you're just not acting on an action urge that, again, could get you into trouble and be ineffective. So in this box, it talks about 4 emotions. DBT has handouts. Oh gosh, I didn't count. I counted the last time we recorded this, and I think I said there were 9. Yes, there are 9.
Yeah, I think that's right.
9 handouts that DBT has of different emotions. So there's more than these 4, but I would say these are the top 4 where people are most often going to use opposite action. So the 4 emotions are fear, anger, sadness, and shame. So real quickly here, I think they honestly put these, maybe not intentionally, but in my experience, I would say these are in order. Like fear would be number 1 for, you know, where opposite action can be helpful. Anger would be number 2, and so on and so forth.
I can see the argument for that.
Yeah, because what it says on here is that, you know, the action urge of fear is like, don't do the thing that you're scared of. And while there may be, and there are legitimate situations that you will encounter in your life where like, oh yeah, don't do that thing because it will be devastating and you are in actual danger. And so yes, get out of there as quick as you can. So often what happens for us is that we fear things that are not really gonna hurt us. Or again, like has the potential to hurt us, but also if we approach and conquer the fear, we could say, the benefits could far outweigh like us not doing the thing, if that makes sense. Like you have a lot to gain here if you can face your fear and do the thing. Like one of the things I think about a lot is people like fearing going to social events. They're like, I don't want to go. I'm not going to know anybody. It's going to feel really weird. And so, yep, I feel nervous about this, right? Nervous, that would be in the fear family. So I'm not going to go. And that's what their action urge is. Avoid it, right? But if they act opposite and they go to the event, then it opens up the door for them to actually maybe really enjoy themselves and meet someone new. But you don't know unless you do it. So fear is a good one for opposite action. If it's like, is this party really going to hurt me? Like worst case scenario, I go and I feel awkward, but it could also be great. Do you have something to add, Kate?
Well, yeah, I think you basically touched on this, but without quite naming it as explicitly that I think could be useful, especially with fear, is the category of my emotion does in fact, fit the facts, right? I can say, yes, check the facts, it's appropriate, etc. But acting on it won't be effective, right? So I think that fear is a particularly good one for that intersection of, it doesn't have to be, yes, there's plenty of times when your fear is not so connected to more objective reality. But even in times when it may be, it's still worth looking at what are the consequences of continuing, giving in the first place or continuing to give in to something that is causing that fear versus facing through the fear, moving, doing something different, and then, having different consequences because of it. So that's all.
Yep, exactly. Thank you for tying that back to check the facts, because I think fear is also a really important emotion to check the facts on, right? Is this thing actually going to be as bad as I think it's going to be? Like, will it really have some potentially devastating consequence on my life? In most cases, no.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Moving on to anger, it says the action urge with anger is often to attack. Now, attack can be a physical attack on someone. It can also be like a verbal, emotional attack when you're pissed off and angry with someone or something. So the opposite action that they name, it says to gently avoid and be a little nice. I'm going to say it a different way. Very cliche here. We talk about walk away and take deep breaths, kind of an idea. But truly, anger, if the action urge is, again, to approach, attack, engage in a fight, whatever it is, the opposite action is to say, you know what, that is not going to serve me, and I am going to walk away. I am going to back off, and I am maybe going to do something to bring myself back down a little bit. Or, when it says be a little nice,
like
is there any... and it's a tough one. So, opposite action can be a real challenge sometimes. And I think when you're angry with another person, it is very hard to think about being nice to them. So I would also maybe switch that to can you, I don't know, be any amount of respectful, decent. But I know that all the way opposite action would be actually be kind to this person who is upsetting you. So there's that. With sadness, it says the action urge can be to withdraw and isolate. Again, if somebody is going through being in a state of depression, that is often what it will look like, is that you are withdrawing and isolating yourself. But the opposite action is to not just stay home and curl up in a ball in your bed, at least not for a long time. Again, doing that for a little bit might be fine. But when we're looking at when does this start to not be effective anymore? If you've been in bed for going on a couple days, might be time to try to get out and take a shower, right? That might be the more effective thing to do. So it says to get active. I often find myself talking about opposite action in the context of depression with clients, right? Because it's very much the I don't wanna, it feels too hard. I'm I'm not saying it isn't hard. But also, you're reporting that you're not feeling very good either, being in the state that you're in. And while we can have a ton of empathy for why you're in the state that you're in, without being too harsh on yourself about it, just recognize what would be good for me here. I think this is kind of where sometimes it can be how can you almost parent yourself in a healthy way, right? Where parents sometimes have to tell their kids, or their kids are I don't want to do this. The parent is we're going to do it anyways. And opposite action can have that feel a little bit sometimes. So that's what it says for sadness. And then shame. For shame, it says that often what you want to do is hide and avoid, not show people what you're feeling ashamed about. But if you're practicing opposite action, it says you're going to tell the secret to people who will accept it. I totally forgot that I shared this example when we first recorded this, but I liked it. I talked about the example for shame of when I was a kid. I'm sure I still would be as an adult put in these situations. But I was terrible at like sports. I hated PE. It was not my jam. And so because I felt shame about like how well I would perform, what did I want to do? I didn't want to participate because I didn't want to look stupid and I didn't want to mess up. And so that's what the action urge was of like, yeah, don't engage, hide it so people don't see how terrible you are at this. But if we're practicing opposite action, what would that look like? Right? It could look like, again, telling someone like they say, but another alternative here is like, no, I'm going to approach maybe the thing that I feel shame about a little bit. Like for me, it would be like, nope, I want to stay on the sidelines, but I'm going to get in and I'm going to play as well as I can. And I might feel self-conscious the whole time, but the more that and again, it kind of goes with fear too, but the more that I approach this, then the less I'm putting so much effort into keeping it hidden, which probably doesn't really serve me and will only lead to the shame building the more I just try to make sure nobody knows about it. So I was thinking of that too for shame. But anything you would add there, Kate, for any of those?
Not off the top of my head. I like the what they say about shame, which is funny because I've been thinking a lot about shame for a while now, and a lot of the messaging we see about shame I don't approve of in our profession right now. But I do like the tell the secret to people who will accept it. And in fact, it's made me potentially reconsider what my personal example will be.
Oh, nice.
Actually, I have a lot. I mean, similar thing, but different emotion. I want to name shame now, so I'm excited about that one. So yeah. Yep. No, I think it was good. Yeah, generally speaking, I think maybe you noticed this in the way that they're talking about the action urges, but really, really, really high level. I think you do. Tell me if you disagree, Michelle, but I think emotions can be roughly said to have go towards or move away from urges, right? Like, right, towards or away. And that if you're somebody who has a really hard time. Oh, never mind. I'm segueing into doing the thing I'm talking about next. So hang on. I'll get to that.
Oh, that's perfect.
Which is, next box down the page is how to do opposite action step by step. And step 1 is identify and name the emotion. And on the page, it says the emotion you want to change. Michelle and I, that is not our jam. Your emotion isn't wrong or bad. It doesn't inherently need to be changed. The thing that we're working on, and what it actually says most of the rest of the time it talks about in the skill, is changing the action urge, right? Not doing the thing that the emotion wants you to do. Usually doing something in opposition will also shift the emotion, but I think it's really dangerous. I think I can say we think it's really dangerous to come at the skill explicitly from I want to stop feeling this way and that perspective, and more be so the words we like to substitute in is I used to say like explore, like, so identify and name the emotion you're wanting to explore, because that has more of a curious feeling to me and doesn't assume that your emotion needs changing, right? If you say what emotion you want to change, it's kind of baked in the assumption that it needs to change, right? So
I especially, if I had to really pick one where it kind of grinds my gears with that verbiage, is thinking about it with the emotion of sadness. Where people tell themselves so much, and I think sadness and shame could really go together. Like, oh, because like I'm feeling sad and now I'm feeling shame about feeling sad. Yeah. Right. And this is not about talking yourself out of what you're feeling, especially like I was talking about a moment ago. If we're looking at it as far as like depression goes, I can't tell you how many of my clients have had the experience where they've actually done opposite action. Like they've been like, I want to stay in bed, but I made myself get up and I made myself eat food, and I did, and I ate food. And then they're like, but I still felt absolutely terrible after I did that. And I'm like, that's okay. They're like, it is? Because I thought that was supposed to make me feel better. And I'm like,
maybe.
No, not necessarily make you feel better, but like you got food in your body. Good. So like while you're feeling terrible, you're eating. Good. Like the depression is not going, you can't like snap your fingers and have it stop. And there isn't necessarily a magical thing that like, oh, I went for a walk around the block, no longer depressed. Like it doesn't work.
It's funny, Michelle. I feel like
that
you're naming
way.
A little bit of a different limitation, but by a different word that I would use. Like, I'm so often we've had folks ask us like the difference between, I don't know, an emotion and a feeling, or, mood and an emotion, or like all these different things. And frankly, I could come down on most different sides of that fence at a given day. But I do think for whatever verbiage you want to use, there's a difference between sadness and depression. And I think you're doing a really good job of naming that opposite action may create a fairly substantial shift in sadness. It's probably not going to create much of a notable shift in depression, right? Same thing for fear versus necessarily just anxiety, right? Like if you're someone who does like, I just have baseline medicatable sort of anxiety, right? Opposite action is not going to cure you of your anxiety disorder, right? But it can help you engage in situations you want to more consistently despite that anxiety, right? So I do think that's really nice to call out the difference between like an emotion like fear or sadness versus the sort of constant state version of that emotion. That becomes more of a diagnosable issue, right? With depression or anxiety or phobias or things like that.
Every emotion has a different level of intensity and can have a different amount of duration. And so, if someone finds themselves in a place where they're like, no, I feel this emotion at like a 9 or 10 much of the time, then you can't just expect that opposite action is going to bring you down to feeling it like a 1 or a 2 and it's fine. Like, no, it's not
unreasonable expectations set it up for failure. The last thing, I'm taking forever about this one, but the part I was actually using as the segue, and I do think is important, is for folks who potentially have a hard time naming, like recognizing and naming their emotions. If that very first step of identifying and naming the emotion you want to explore feels like, well, I'm just going to stop right there, because how do I even, the internal sense at the bare minimum of, is it an approach, like, or move towards emotion, or is it a retreat or move away from emotion? That level of information, I think it can be more accessible to folks more often. And if you can sort it into those things, you can then spend more time utilizing like some of the information on the 9 or whatever emotions, the sheets that they have, or other things to try and leaf through not all of the emotions, but the ones that maybe feel like moving towards, and see which ones might feel like they fit more with your physical responses and stuff like that. So just a reminder that not everybody might have an easy time with the identifying and naming, and there's still data to be had to have as a starting place for opposite action.
Yeah. This is where emotion wheels can also really come in handy. So if you don't know what an emotion wheel is, Google it. There are a gazillion online that will pop right up for you, and you can find one, and it will help you hone in on what your emotion is. We love emotion wheels. So after you have identified the emotion that you're working with, then the next thing is going to be to check the facts. So we're not going to get too deep into this today because we have other episodes all about it. But I really actually like the example that it gives on the page. So I'm just going to talk about what it says. Like it says, example, irritation fits the facts when your car is cut in front of. Road rage does not. And if you want to check the facts by using the entire check the facts worksheet, great. That's awesome. But we also know that that can be time intensive and not always realistic. So you can do it with the shortcut question that we've talked about many times on the podcast, which is asking yourself, what do I actually know? Right? What I know is that a car cut in front of me. I don't know who's driving the car. I don't know why they cut in front of me. I don't know any of that. So if I take those pieces out of maybe the story that I'm telling myself, this is what I know. And with that information standing by itself, yeah, does my emotion add up? Like the intensity of it? Maybe, maybe not. Most people, I find that after you've been practicing DBT for a while, just the simple phrase of like, hey, did you check the facts, could often lead most people to just pause and be like, well, when I look at it, yes, I see that maybe my emotion or its intensity was not really fitting the facts. And most people can call themselves out on it pretty quickly after a while. But yeah, that's the next thing you want to do is you want to find out, because like with that flow chart that Kate was talking about at the beginning, whether or not your emotion checks the facts and fits is going to impact what decisions you might make next.
All right. The step 3 is identify and describe your action urges. This one, I think, see guys, I'm trying so hard to scrape the I thinks out of, I say it so often. Feels like trying to pull out my own tongue. Identifying, describing action urges is a place where honesty with self is incredibly important and also sometimes incredibly difficult. We don't always like to admit to ourselves what our urges are, especially if they're less couth. If they are something that we consider particularly outside our value system, or to be vulgar or barbaric or inappropriate or what have you, sort of judgments we might make, then it can be hard to really sit with and own that that's what the urge is. Remember, by the way, that having an urge is not, that does not define you as a person, right? Human bodies are capable of these urges. That's true of all human bodies. Some have them more often, some have them less often, but urges happen for everybody and not all of them are couth. That's right. Otherwise human history would look very different, right? So I would just really encourage folks to be, curious with themselves and honest when it comes to this step, because you're going to have a really hard time accurately acting in opposition to your emotion and your action urges if you are incorrectly identifying your action urge. So it's just in your head, it's just thoughts. You don't have to give it more judgment or credence than that. And if you ignore it or soften it or look around it instead of at it, then you're not giving the skill as much of a chance to do its job.
Yeah. Yep. It's a time to be really unfiltered.
Yes.
With step number 3. Be really real with yourself of what you're wanting to do. Even if you're thinking, you're like, oh man, that makes me sound so intense or like a terrible human being or whatever it is. Be real about it. You don't have to tell anybody else, but be honest with yourself.
Exactly.
So step number 4 says, ask wise mind, is expression or acting on this emotion effective in this situation? And this is key because it says if your emotion does not fit the facts or if acting on your emotion is not effective, then we're going to move on to the next 3 steps that we're going to talk about in a moment here. So again, this is probably sounding like the flowchart Kate talked about. So you've checked the facts, but now asking wise mind, is it effective for me to do the urge that I'm having? And with asking wise mind, some people have a really, well-developed relationship with their wise mind. And some people are like, I don't know how to find my wise mind, or I'm really new at this DBT thing. How do I do that exactly? Yes, there is this question here of asking yourself, is this effective? But also, if you're able to, for a moment, just think about what would happen next if I did this thing? Like, how would this play out? Like, if I could recognize that when I'm in a verbal altercation with somebody and they're yelling at me, that my action urge is that I want to punch them in the face, well, what would potentially then happen? Then am I opening myself up for them to maybe come back at me in a physically aggressive way? Am I opening myself up for law enforcement to get involved? Am I like, is this the path that I want to go down? And in some cases, it really may be like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, for as much as I want to really like convey, like, look, I am super pissed off about what's going on. I don't want to experience what's going to come next. So even just playing that out a little bit can be helpful. Now, this is not easy to do in the moment, because a lot about opposite action is you have to slow down and catch your action urge before you do it. And that is extremely difficult work, but it does require a pause. And in the pause is where wise mind can enter the scene. And when wise mind comes in, and wise mind is able to say to you something like, hey, that might not be the direction you want to go in. Maybe try this instead. This part is really important. So having other DBT skills in your toolkit, we could say, is going to be really important here, because one thing we haven't named yet is oftentimes acting opposite is going to pull in other skills. Acting opposite is going to look like using stop, probably. Acting opposite may look like doing tip. Acting opposite may look like using some of the interpersonal effectiveness skills. Like, it's going to look like using some other DBT stuff most of the time when you actually get there to doing the opposite action. So if you are in this fourth step of asking your wise mind, like, is this effective? Is this going to be in my best interest? Could this have some pretty bad consequences that I might want to avoid? You may start to notice that some other DBT skills, if you've been practicing DBT, start to present themselves of like, or I could do this. Try it. Haven't done it yet before, but I could try it and see what it's going to feel like. So that's one option of how it could look.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think you named this a bit, but one thing I would just call out explicitly, hopefully your wise mind would do this itself, but in case, is just a reminder that effective looks past this moment, right? Like, oh my God, guys. I'm sorry. Jin is throwing an absolute conniption fit on the other side of the door. I think I have to let him in or I'm not going to be able to think. 1 second. But yeah, the idea that efficacy looks at your goals outside of this moment. I think that can be some. Not I think. I've found. There's a better one. I've found that is something that is important sometimes to remind people for. All right, I will go on with my next step in half a fucking second, but I gotta let this cat in before he murders me.
Yeah. While Kate is letting Jin in, just to fill in the space here, another thing about wise mind just in general, even though this is not an episode about wise mind, but again, boy, do you need it for opposite action. Wise mind is really good at zooming out. Emotion mind is all zoomed in. Emotion mind is in the present almost too much to where it's hard to think about what does this mean if I do this, or what comes next if I make this choice. Emotion mind isn't very good at that, but wise mind, if you're in that place, will help you zoom out and see other perspectives and see the big picture and think dialectically. So that's why it's important to check in with it when you're determining what to do next.
Thank you. Ow.
You're
Jin
welcome.
is making muffins. It hurts.
With like his claws? Is that what you call it?
Yes, yeah.
When he's kneading you?
Yes. All right, so the next step is to, oh, wait.
Yeah, you're on step number 5.
Oh my gosh, so my brain went, they're the same. No, okay, I did that with the action urges. This identify your opposite action urges. See, you guys, this is where the tired is showing up. I was like, I swear I just did that. So no, what is the opposite action urge, right? So, you've taken the time now to figure out what the emotion is, to figure out what the emotion is asking you to do. Please don't rub up on the microphone, Jen. And so now you are at the step of needing to figure out what to do instead. My God, help us. So this is another place to really spend at least a moment, right? Not to rush through. It can be easy enough to just look at, I don't know, a first intuition, maybe one of the handouts on that DBT gives, and just be like, okay, it says this is the opposite action for this emotion. Got it. Done. Let's do it. And maybe that's not exactly right for you. Maybe you have a different urge with the emotion to begin with, and so doing the action, or doing the opposite action, that DBT suggests might just fall a little flat, might not quite do the trick that you're looking for it to do. So spending some time and really personally identifying not just what, again, is your urge, but what really feels like it pulls in direct opposition to that urge. I don't know, for my own life, I'll say, for instance, with like self-harming, while it's fabulous to not self-harm, I would count that as more like, I don't know, riding the wave, right? Or something like that, urge surfing. Whereas if instead of self-harming, I went and did something actively kind to my body, right? Or went and actively coped in a very different or healthier way, right? That would be something that would be more in opposition than just not doing something. So whatever it might look like, I guess this is just a call to make it personal for me to not necessarily go with the generic, but to spend some time really feeling out for yourself if this is actually gonna do the trick, be in actual opposition to your urge. Now he's yelling about being in here. I don't know what to do with this cat right now, guys. My goodness. He's a whole thing. Anyway, Michelle, you're up next. I'm probably going to do, I don't know, let him out again? Take the door off its hinges so he stops complaining? I don't know.
I'll also add on a quick thing to what you were saying, because while I do see your perspective on make sure that you're choosing an opposite action that feels authentic and genuine for you, don't feel like you have to do the opposite action suggestions that DBT has in the handouts. I will also give a little plug for the handouts for the 9 different emotions that it talks about, because what can be helpful, like a little hack I would suggest, is, let's say, I think we all have an emotion that is our Achilles heel. Like an emotion that we feel really uncomfortable feeling, really uncomfortable expressing, or it's the emotion that maybe we're like, nope, this one just runs the show when it comes to play, right? It just takes over and I feel powerless and my emotion mind just goes here all the time. Whatever emotion that is for you, if you take a look at the DBT handout for opposite actions for that emotion, read it, maybe even take like a screenshot of it with your phone to where you can look at it and remember it. And think about if there is anything from that might be helpful for you. Some of the things on that list might feel really awkward and weird. And you're like, I don't know. But it is a good starting point to then what Kate was talking about of like, then you can personalize it once you've maybe practiced it in 1 or 2 of the ways that DBT might suggest. So it's kind of a both and, right?
That's fair. I think I was thinking of it more as like a troubleshooting kind of thing.
It's a good starting point.
Like, if it's not working, then it may be because the opposite action isn't quite right. Isn't exactly
definitely
in that opposite direction, but you're right. And it's a good to point out it's not I like the sheets a lot. No shade being thrown on the sheets. I think they're fabulous resources, and many to most people probably do find stuff that is well suited to them there. Just didn't want people to think that was the exhaustive list of all things that could be opposite actions.
Totally. Yes. It can look a lot of other ways too that are not listed on the handouts. Yep. For step number 6, it says act opposite all the way to your action urges. So speaking of those handouts, let's see. What page do they begin on?
Boy.
Kate. Let's see. Oh, the next one, 221.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Yeah, so that's when the series of these 9 handouts begin. The first one they talk about is fear. Because again, that's front and center, I feel like, with opposite action. But on these handouts, DBT breaks it down into what are the opposite actions and then what are the all the way opposite actions. I think of this as like, I don't know, with swimming. Like doing opposite action is like getting in the water. Doing all the way opposite action is like going for broke and getting in the deep end. And when you look at the list on the handout, some might stand out to you more than others. But the ideal is that you're not just going to, how would I put it? Like, do the absence of what it's telling you to do. Here's where I'll bring back in my spider example because I can't not talk about it. Since it's such an easy one to explain, right? I have a fear of spiders. So what is my action urge with spiders? I don't want to go near them. Fuck that. Like, I don't like them. And also just deciding that I am not going to be in that room of my house for as long as the spider is in there. And probably have the spider just dominate all of my thoughts for the remainder of my day because I know it's in there is not going to be effective. So I need to do something. Now, I can approach the spider and make an effort to kill or remove it in some way. But how do I do that? Do I do that where I'm like, how would I even explain it? I don't know. Very tentatively going towards it, freaking out the whole time. Before I do the thing, I'm like, okay, thank God that's over. Or am I like, okay, let me really ground myself. I can do this, right? Like really change my self-talk. Like it says the all the way opposite action for fear is like change posture, keep a confident voice tone, change your body chemistry with paced breathing. Sneak peek if you've never seen these handouts before, so much of the all the way opposite actions are about changing and shifting your physiology. Doing something really different with your body because that helps tremendously. But can I actually approach the spider where I maybe am acting a little more confident in myself and telling myself I can do this. I'm safe. I've got this, right? Like really adding in that stuff. It's not just about the approach. It is about how you approach. Like with the example I was giving earlier about somebody being scared of a social event. Sure, they can go to the social event. That's not avoiding, that's approaching. But when they're there, then do they just go off in a corner by themselves and don't talk to anybody the whole time and just endure the social event for 2 hours, gritting their teeth? Or is it like, no, I'm here. Let me walk up to someone and introduce myself and really be here and really try to make the most of this. So that's what they're talking about with the distinction between opposite action and all the way opposite action. Like really try to put yourself in it 100%, even if it is extremely uncomfortable and you continue to feel your emotion the entire time. Right? That person at the social event might feel fear for the entire 2 hours that they're there. But the more you really go all in, the better the experience is going to be for you. And the better it's going to be the next time you find yourself in a similar situation. Because then you'll have I guess we could say, maybe like a good or positive memory to look back on. Rather than like, oh yeah, I did go to that party, but it sucked and I hated it. Like, Well, did you give it your all? Did you fully engage? Did you really approach? You might have been setting yourself up to have a better experience if you had done it all the way. That was kind of a soapbox about all the way opposite action. I feel like I really went in on that one. So we'll move on to the last one, Kate, of step number 7.
Well, step number 7 is pretty straightforward. It is simply whatever you were doing, keep doing it. Right? Keep doing your opposite action over and over and over. It says until your emotion changes, but we already decided we don't like that verbiage. So instead, I like to say until the action urge shifts, right? Or dissipates, whichever way you might want to think about it. Probably the emotion that is attached to it will also shift, but that is not necessarily the place that I think it's healthy to come from. So yeah, just do it and do it again and keep doing it. Like sometimes it may be repetitious, right? They say over and over again. It may be continuing to do it for a longer and longer amount of time, right? Depending on what sort of action it is. It may or may not be iterative potentially even, but yeah, keep doing it until you can sense essentially that you don't need to be doing it anymore. And the thing that you were moving in opposition to no longer is there as opposition, right? Isn't there pulling you back in the other direction anymore? So, yeah.
Great. Okay, so now we're going to each share a personal example. I realized too with the personal examples we chose, this is going to tell listeners quite a bit because we, like with what I'm about to share anyways, Kate and I recently recorded and released an episode of The Couch and the Chair on May 29th where I talked about this there. I did talk about it a little bit on the podcast, I think actually when we had Sarah on as a guest. So listeners may be aware that I am currently in the process of, I've been separated from my husband now for a few months, and I am just now in the process of the legal divorce beginning with filing papers and things like that. So that is an update on things in my life. But when I was thinking about, well, when have I used opposite action recently? I was like, oh, a couple days ago. So I'm going to just quickly go through the 7 steps because yes, when Kate and I really go deeper into each of those, I understand you may be like, wow, this sounds like a lot, you guys. And it is a lot. This is not an easy skill to do at all. It can be very challenging. And hopefully hearing these personal examples will make it seem a little less daunting. That's my hope. So on Friday, or no, not on Friday. What am I saying? On Friday, I actually signed paperwork to file for the legal divorce from my husband. And I saw him yesterday. And I told him. For me, it felt in integrity. I knew that I could have waited until, say, his own attorney told him that I had filed and that kind of a thing. But it felt in integrity to me to say it to him. I thought, this is the above board thing that I want to do. This is what feels good to me to have him hear this from me first, rather than hearing it through an impartial third party, because it is a big deal to go through this change that we're going through. So when I was making that decision to tell him, and I knew when I was going to tell him, step number 1, identify and naming the emotion, I felt scared because I didn't know exactly what his response would be to hearing me say that, we're moving from being separated up until this point to now we're taking the next step to make this legal and official. To check the facts and think about, does my fear and or its intensity fit the facts? I think it makes sense to feel nervous. Yeah, that makes sense to me. But I also was thinking about, sometimes I'll ask myself this, how does DBT put it? What's the threat? What's the catastrophe, right? Those are some of the DBT questions and check the facts. But sometimes I'll just ask myself, what is the worst case scenario here? How bad does this get? And I was like, well, he might get pretty upset with me. He might have some not nice things to say. For better or worse, this also wouldn't be the first time that he has had not nice things to say towards me. And I've endured that before. And so, yes, I think feeling nervous does fit the facts, but that's not enough of a reason to then do what fear would tell me to do, which is just like, don't say anything. Feels too much to say something. Like, no, I still think it's in my best interest to do it anyways. But yeah, so check the facts. I realized, feeling nervous does fit. Anything more intense than that, I don't think really would. Then step 3, identify and describe your action urges. So, I mean, if the nervousness, the fear were running the show, I would have avoided. That would have probably been my action urge. But with step 4 of asking wise mind, again, I think it really was my wise mind telling me that this feels like the way I want to approach this challenging situation. I just kind of knew it in my gut of like, this feels in integrity with myself to make this decision to tell him face to face. And so then opposite actions, right? So the opposite action is to do it. And I really try, because it says to like act opposite all the way. I looked him in the eye when I said it. I really intentionally wanted to keep it short, appear confident, even if inside I was scared of how he was going to respond when he heard it from me. And then we were in the conversation for a little while. And yes, he was not pleased. But less going into like how he responded to me or what he said, and more about like with the idea of repeating, acting opposite. I didn't backtrack. I didn't apologize. I didn't do some of those things that might have been tempting to try to make it better for him. Yeah, to placate. Exactly. I still stuck to it. And so I faced the fear that I was feeling and approached it and told him anyways.
Woo-hoo.
So that's the example I have. What about you, Kate? What's your example?
No, I'm like, how little can I get away with saying and still make this comprehensible? Mine, I guess, technically was back at the end of March, but I was thinking about shame after after we started recording today. And I have a huge, like probably the biggest example of shame that I have ever experienced recently. Well, recently I've had the biggest experience of shame ever. There you go. That's a better sentence. So, as Michelle was mentioning earlier, I run a clinic, and to put an incredibly long and arduous story short, I had to fire my admin, my primary admin, my office manager, for not having done the job really almost at all for 4 years. And a lot of what that meant was that for a while there, my clinicians and my clinic were kind of at risk. And that was really, really distressing to me. There were things that I had been trusting and not trusting and verifying. And there had been a lot of consequences to that, I guess, again, to try and keep it pretty high level. So I felt an enormous amount of shame for the fact that I had trusted to that level, that I had failed to verify, to provide more oversight, so I was sure of what was happening, make myself more educated, blah, 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 blah. Lots of things. Lots of weeping and shame. I think it's the first time in my life I've ever wept in pure, unadulterated shame. And so, as pointed out, right, the baseline action urge for shame is not so much to run around and tell people. I felt not just ashamed, but deeply embarrassed, deeply foolish. And so there's certainly was an amount of temptation to say as little as possible about it to the clinicians, etc., at the clinic, to try and just make everything better in the background and be like, nobody needs to know, right? That's absolutely a temptation that lived there. Michelle, you were doing such a great job of walking people through the steps, and here I am just telling the fucking story. Hold on. See you guys. I swear.
You're great so far.
I'm
I like where you're
awake.
going with it.
I know. I really have more or less, right? Like I did identify and name the emotion.
You're
it was
identifying
shame. Yep. Check the facts. I do. My emotion fit the facts. I do believe still. I think it made sense to feel ashamed. I did things that were outside of my values and created the potential for harm in places and people that I care about. That being said, acting on the shame, right? The question of is expressing or acting on this emotion effective in this situation? Expressing, I guess I was making a little even finer point of it because I did think expressing it was helpful, but that's not the action urge, right? Again, they mix up some of their wording weirdly on this. But acting on the action urge of keeping it all a secret was not going to be effective and not going to be, the phrase you kept using, Michelle, not in alignment, in...
Oh, integrity.
Integrity, there you go. Was not going to be in integrity for me. So what was the identify opposite actions? So my opposite actions were going into meetings with all of my other employees and being honest about what had gone down and what the consequences were, and what we were going to be having to do to fix things. It says act opposite all the way. I'm not exactly sure what that means here in this case, other than, I was on the Zoom call. I made sure I was, because we were a wholly virtual space, right? So a little bit different constraints, but I faced everybody. I had my camera on, right? I made sure people were there, that I answered questions honestly, right? I didn't just like tell people and flee with no question and answer session, right? People had the opportunity to ask questions, to get upset about it, right? And have me acknowledge, right? And validate those things. So there are definitely ways.
Can I name what it says on the sheet, Kate?
Yes, please.
Because you did so many of these. It said opposite actions for shame.
Oh, yeah.
Make public your behavior.
Yep.
Apologize for behavior. Yep. Repair the transgressions or work to prevent or repair similar harm for others.
Did that.
Commit to avoiding that mistake in the future.
Yeah.
Accept the consequences gracefully. And then it says all the way opposite actions for shame. Forgive yourself. Acknowledge the causes of your behavior, and then it says, let it go.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close in a lot of ways.
You did a lot of that.
Yeah. It's not entirely gone. I guess I haven't fully let it go. It's only been 10 weeks, so I'll give myself that it's been a fair bit. But yeah,
so much longer you've been in it. Feels like a year.
But yeah, I do think at least I've gotten I understand who I am and how I got there. Right. I can see a lot better the path that was there. And I do think I was foolish, but I don't feel a terrible amount of self-censure anymore about it because I did do the other bits. Right. I think I don't know if it mentions that, but I do think that doing the opposite action is part of the all the way, building up the option for the all the wayness by giving you the option to move on, right? Because you have made it public, you have done your repairs, right? You have done all these other things. So now you can forgive yourself, right? I think entering into the forgiving yourself bit, how would you get there without the other steps? So yeah, It was big deal feels, but it served me tremendously well.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, okay, it's just me. It's me and me.
Closing moment.
All right. Let me get a second to get settled in my chair. And clear my throat. I've been getting I'm looking at you, Michelle, always with the kids. I'm like, oh, why do I have postnasal drip? What's happening?
Noah has a new stuffed nose. I think you went about 4 or 5 days without one.
Anyway, entirely plausible because I saw Michelle this week and I'm getting sick. So I'll try not to cough in the middle of everyone's closing moment. Wish me luck. Okay. Take a moment to settle yourself into a position that feels comfortable and sustainable for our closing moment. This could look like sitting, laying down, standing, walking, whatever feels good and right in your body. And if you're safe and feel comfortable doing so, I invite you to close your eyes. To begin with, we're just going to notice our breath. You don't need to breathe any more deeply or any more slowly than you are naturally. It's just about tuning in. Really focusing in on the rhythms and the sensations of your breath and letting them welcome you into your body and into the present moment. For today's exercise, I'd like you to take a moment and bring one of two things to mind. Either, if in hearing us talk so much about opposite action, you're thinking back to a time in your life and you're like, hey, I may not have known exactly what this was, but I practiced this here. If you have a really clear example of that, feel free to bring that situation and whole course of action that you took to mind. If instead, perhaps there's an emotion that you confront regularly that you think could use some exploration and some possibility for opposite action, or an urge that you're having or may have in the near future, and take a moment to bring to mind an imagined scenario in which that occurs and you face that choice of how to behave. Whether you're remembering or creating for yourself anew the scenario, take the moment to walk yourself through it, sort of step by step, as Michelle and I did in our shares. Taking the time first to identify and name whatever the emotion is that's causing the urge that you're exploring. Taking a moment to check in if that emotion seems to fit the facts in its duration or intensity. Perhaps just asking yourself what you actually know. Once you've done that, again, taking the moment to identify and describe your action urges. If you're remembering, this is a great place to slow the memory down. We may not always in the moment have been terribly aware of these things unfolding or how well we investigated it, so taking that time to really notice when and how did you become aware of having that action urge. Once you've been able to do that, take the time to ask your wise mind if expressing or really acting on that action urge and emotion is actually going to be effective. Take the time to check it against your longer term goals, the you of tomorrow who's going to have to live with the consequences. And if that emotion doesn't fit the facts, or even if it does, but acting on it is not going to be in service to you and your goals, then take the moment to move into identifying opposite actions. Right? Again, for remembering, you might take the moment to slow down and think, how did I come up with what I wanted to do here? What was my thought process like to get to the conclusion of the action that I took instead of the action that I was learning or looking to avoid, Once you've taken the time to identify what that opposite action is, or notice how you got there if you're recalling a memory, go ahead and imagine yourself doing it. Right? If you're creating this scenario entirely for yourself, take this moment to walk yourself through doing the thing, right? Taking the steps, not just to act opposite, but to commit and act opposite all the way. As you're doing that, take a moment here, everyone, whether they are recalling or creating in this moment, and notice, how does that feel in your body? What do you notice about your body or your emotions or your thoughts as you cross that threshold in your imagination into doing the opposite action? As you continue to recall or imagine yourself repeating that opposite action or continuing in that path as long as you need, what, if anything, do you notice shifting about your physical sensations, your emotions, your thoughts. How do things shift over the experience, and what is your emotion or impression towards yourself? Once you imagine having acted opposite enough and for long enough that you have achieved your end of shifting away from the action urge that you were avoiding, or that wasn't going to serve you. Just taking a moment to appreciate what that whole experience felt like for you, either at the time when you were doing it or in your imagination just now. When you've had a moment to do that, you can go ahead and begin to let go of that imagined scenario, whether recalled or created. Take the time to come back into your body and into the room, doing some gentle stretches, maybe rotating your neck or shoulders, wrists or elbows, whatever feels good and right in your body. Maybe taking a couple of slower, deeper breaths, and when you're ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.